Good evening, everyone. I am Monali Patel, member of Lex Auxilium. Uh, welcomes you all on the behalf of Lex Auxilium and Just Corpus. The subject matter for today's session is tips on how to crack the UGC NET, and the resource person for the session is Mrs. Sayantani Bagchi Bhattacharya. Hope you all are doing safe and healthy. I would like to introduce ma'am. Mrs. Sayantani is an alumnus of the University of Calcutta and National Law University, Odisha, and currently is pursuing her Ph.D. from WBNUJS, Kolkata. She specializes in constitutional law. She was a recipient of Mamraj Agarwal Rashtriya Puraskar, received from the Honorable Governor of West Bengal for securing the highest mark in her graduation. She has worked for the Center for Regulatory Studies, Governance and Public Policy as a researcher. Ma'am has also worked with the School of Legal Studies, CMR University, Bengaluru, as an assistant professor. Currently, she is an assistant professor and a faculty of constitutional law at National Law University, Jodhpur. Without taking much of the time, I would quickly like to introduce the organizer of today's session, Lex Auxilium and Just Corpus. Lex Auxilium aims to impart legal education and inculcate values that stand to benefit the masses. We at Lex Auxilium aim to build a holistic environment for our subscribers by creating and maximizing opportunities for the law students and aspiring lawyers. We wish to provide them with enriching opportunities that maximizes their career potential by hosting webinars, online internships, and website publications. The Just Corpus is a double-blind, peer-reviewed, interdisciplinary e-journal. The Just Corpus aims to bring the various accepts and chains of law under a single umbrella and provide service to the students. Just Corpus Law Journal publishes manuscripts in the field of law. Without taking much of the time, over to you, ma'am.
Am I audible to you? Am I audible
yes,
to you? All right. Okay. Thank you, Monali, for the introduction. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Team Lex Auxilium and Team Just Corpus for the wonderful opportunity that you've given me. And I think, okay, I would like to start with a disclaimer, and that is probably I am no expert in, imparting a kind of a, training in these matters, but I'm here to share my experience with all of you watching this program today. So the entire experience, that I've had of, till the time I had cleared this particular examination was something, and that kind of taught me so many different things. And most importantly, the thing that I learned from this entire exercise was that you need a lot of patience and you need to be very strategic in your approach to clear this particular exam. There is no point, or there's no reason behind you to feel anxious or to feel low if you don't end up qualifying this paper in your first or second attempt. But what I feel is that you should be persistent, and you shouldn't lose hope, and you need to be very smart. And of course, along with the hard work that you put in, you also have to be very smart while you prepare for this particular exam. It's not only hard work that would, or that is likely to yield good results, but you also need to be smart, as I said. So this particular exam, that is the NET exam, is conducted by the UGC. Right? So as we know that UGC is the body which kind of takes care of the entire the domain of higher education, and with regard to how the universities will be governed and how decisions would be taken. It issues several guidelines, and it has a wide range of activities that it kind of does. So UGC is the primary body which kind of takes up this responsibility of conducting NET. And initially it was the CBSE which was entrusted with the responsibility of conducting NET. But gradually it has been entrusted to a different agency, that is the National Testing Agency, which conducts NET at this point of time. So we need to understand that NET can be for kind of, there are two types here when we talk about NET primarily. The first one is for, let's say, the social science, people belonging to the social science background, or let's say, humanities for that matter. And there are other subjects as well, but there is another NET that is conducted purely for the science subjects. So that is, of course, not very pertinent for our discussion today. But what we have to understand is the pattern has undergone a bit of change. And what is this change all about? See, initially, I mean, at the time when I had the opportunity of clearing this paper, there were kind of, there were three divisions in the paper. So there were three papers practically. First was the first paper that you still have right now. The second and the third papers were the law papers, right? And the law papers were divided into two, right? One containing 50 marks, the first one, and the second would contain 50 questions, I'm sorry. And the second one would have 75 questions, and all of them were MCQs. So ultimately, this was changed when NTA kind of took over. And now the pattern is a bit different. Now you no longer have OMR sheets, you have a computer-based test. And at this point of time, as you can see, that the papers have been clubbed into two papers. I mean, the two law papers that you had have been clubbed into one. So there's one first paper and the second paper, which is purely the paper relating to your specialization area. So for us, it is the law paper which we specialize in, right? So apart from this, it is also very important for us to look at several technical factors which are, relevant here in this case. The first and the foremost factor here is what is the eligibility? Now, in order to be eligible to appear for NET, you need to you need to pursue your masters while doing your masters, you can appear for NET, but that would be, if you clear it, it is subject to the result of yours that you obtain in your masters. And once you qualify your masters with 55% minimum, your NET, the exam that you've already qualified, let's say, that is kind of confirmed. Right? So either you can do it that way, or if you already have a master's in a particular field, then you can, obviously you need to have that 55% cutoff. So that is important. So immediately after that, you are eligible to appear for NET. So this is a very important thing that I wanted to talk about. Now, the next thing is that what is the ultimate purpose that this entire concept of NET serves? NET is basically nothing but it is the minimum criteria that is required, and it helps you to apply for lecturership wherever you want to, like across India, and it's the minimum criteria that is required. And here there is another important information that I would like to share. That is, at times we are a bit confused about NET and JRF. It's a junior research fellowship. So NET and JRF are nothing but it's the same exam that is conducted, but the cutoff that is there for JRF is a bit higher when compared to NET. So generally this cutoff varies, right? From year to year it varies. And let's say if you appear, or let's say if you apply for JRF and NET, so you have two options that are given to you. One is NET and one is NET and JRF. So if you're smart enough to apply for NET and JRF, there is no need to feel that if you don't qualify for JRF, you will automatically be out of the game. No, it's not like that. If you don't appear, if you don't qualify for JRF and you still qualify for the for NET, you will be a NET holder, or you will be NET qualified in that case, right? But if you end up getting a slightly higher percentage, then of course you are JRF qualified. But here there is an important thing. NET is something which is preliminary, that is required for you to apply for the post of assistant professor or lecturership, at least in higher education sector, in the universities or colleges across India. And most importantly, JRF, right? JRF, the ones who clear JRF, they are eligible to go for research, right? So research in the sense, you ideally take up research and you pursue your PhD, right? And there's a particular span, till the time you complete your PhD, the government pays a certain amount of stipend to you. So that may range from, let's say, 25,000 rupees to 30,000 rupees. So the first initial years you are appointed as, let's say you become the junior research fellow, but gradually as you go, you become the senior research fellow, and then you procure your PhD. So it's a full-time work that you have when it comes to JRF, right? So you're not supposed to be like, let's say, working in a particular institution as a net holder, right? Let's say as a lecturer, and simultaneously pursue your PhD. So both the things cannot be done simultaneously. But yes, remember that NET is a degree that you have for your lifetime, right? And it's something that will be there for you. It will be there with you. Even if you have JRF or you don't, or you're done with your PhD, the NET is the basic minimum qualification that you require. So this is something important that I had to say about the technical considerations. Now, anyone can apply, as I said, but yeah, in India, you must be seeing, or you must have come across situations where we had experiences where, let's say, PhD degree holders, the ones who have their PhD, they are the ones who would probably, they will be appointed as assistant professors, and they can do away with this requirement of NET. If somebody does not have a NET but has a PhD, then the person will automatically be considered for the post of an assistant professor. So in that case, NET is not a minimum criteria. Now, these are certain technical aspects of NET. Now, I come to the most important part, and I think this is something that we all must, kind of think about, and that is how to go about preparing for the papers that are there in this particular exam. So at times, like from my personal experience, I felt that, at times you feel very low because you're unable to clear it in your first attempt. So I have been able to clear it in my third attempt. So I've not been, but it's not like, it's like a lesson that you learn in the process, right? It's not like, okay, you lose hope because at once, or let's say at one go, you're not able to clear the paper. It's not like that, right? There are tremendously good students I've seen, or let's say students with tremendous potential. They are unable to clear NET. Even let's say at the fifth or sixth attempt. But that's not a big deal. That doesn't determine whether you are a meritorious candidate or not. So that's not the determining factor. But because it's the minimum requirement prescribed by the UGC, so we need to clear this, right? So there is nothing to feel bad about the fact that, no, I couldn't clear my NET at the first attempt. So now coming to the pattern that we see, as I said, there are two papers. The first paper is paper one, which is dealing with the, the basic, it's an aptitude based general kind of a paper, which is applicable for all the people, all the, aspirants of this particular examination. They will all have to appear for this particular paper. Now, in this particular exam that you have several parts which are existing here. Now, let's say there is a theoretical part, and there is a, practical, there's a theoretical part and a practical part as well. Now, when we talk about the theoretical part in the first paper that we see that there are things like teaching aptitude, which talks about the basic elements that are required, in this particular profession. What would be the teaching pedagogy, or what are the methods that you adopt while teaching, or let's say what are, you need to understand the perspectives of both the teacher and the learner, and also the student. So from their perspectives, questions are asked, right? So let's say now they've introduced some new elements into this first paper. which talks about certain methods of teaching in higher learning, which would include, let's say, online methods, like SWAM, or let's say SWAM Prabha. So they have questions with regard to these things also. They also have questions in the first part regarding, let's say, how you go about evaluating things, right? So you have certain evaluative techniques, how you go about implementing these evaluative techniques, and how you evaluate, right, a student's performance. So now, let's say this is one which is important, or let's say you come to research aptitude. Now, when you talk about research aptitude, I'm sure students who are pursuing law and they have done their masters, they have had a paper for their masters, which is titled as research methodology. And research methodology is a subject which teaches you the basics of research, because you step into the field of academics, and research is the first step that you take. So you have a kind of a kind of a privilege over and above the ones who haven't been taught research methodology. So there are several books which are available on research, like research aptitude primarily. Like, for example, to give you certain examples, like if I say, what are the types of research, right? Or let's say we have heard about qualitative research, we've heard about quantitative research, we have heard about the concepts of hypothesis, we have heard about, techniques of research, right? So there are several ways, what are the steps that are involved in research? How do you go about experimenting with different data and things like that? So research aptitude is, again, you can take up, you need not be, you need not restrict yourself to legal research, but research in general, right? Even if you are a student of law appearing for paper one, you need to talk about, or you need to learn or focus on, let's say the basics of research, right? The basics of research, as in research in social science or humanities. I think that is enough for you to, when you try to cover this topic of research aptitude. There's another section called the comprehension part. Now, in the comprehension part, you will see that there is a passage given to you along with a certain number of questions. So what you do is, firstly, the moment you get that question paper, you start reading it, right? And reading it is not a general reading that you do. Always remember, starting from the first minute till the last minute, you need to be extremely alert when you read the question, because reading the question is very important. Because see, at times we might not be in a position to know every answer possible. So in that case, what we do is we try to think, we try to deliberate, we try to reflect, and then we come up with something which could probably be the answer. It need not necessarily be the answer that is very clear in our mind, but by applying our common sense, or by applying our thinking in a prudent manner, we reach that conclusion that yes, this could be the answer. And then you finally come up with the answer sheet, and then you see that yes, what you thought was correct, it led you to the correct conclusion. So that would be something really good. And comprehension, as I said, the moment you get the question paper, it appears on the screen, make it a point that you read, right? You read the comprehension, you read the passage very, very clearly. So once you are done with the reading of the passage, and then quickly take a look at the questions. The ones who are not very well equipped, with these things, what makes you perfect is practice, right? So the moment you start practicing, the moment you kind of, develop the habit of reading things as rapidly as possible, you automatically, your mind gets alert. So you read the passage quickly, look at the questions, and then at the back of your mind, it keeps running. By the time you ultimately reach that part while solving the answers, your mind already has somehow, kind of identified what could be the probable answers. So that is about comprehension. With regard to communication, again, let's say the fourth unit, which deals with communication, it talks about several things, like, for example, how to effectively communicate, right? What are the possible barriers to communication, right? And this is all from the perspective of, let's say, a researcher, let's say a teacher, all from those perspectives, right? Not only from their perspective, but also from the perspective of the learner, right? So what you think could be, let's say, a barrier to an effective communication, right? So what are the aids to effective communication? How do we go about, enhancing the quality of, things that we deliver, right? The quality of the things we speak. So how do you go about improving on that? So that is a part of communication. Now, you have, let's say, when you talk about the other theoretical aspects, you have questions from higher education system, you have questions from environment, right, which is again very, very important. So be very well aware of different developments that are taking place. People, this thing is very important that you must be aware of, and that is all the contemporary developments happening all around. You should be alert, you should be aware of those developments. Let's say with respect to all the different protocols, the different agreements, the different conventions that come up in the field of environmental law. So you are a student of, let's say, law, and you have the privilege of studying things like, let's say, the Kyoto Protocol, or let's say the Rio Summit, etc., etc. So you have this privilege of knowing many things which the others might not be knowing. So I think you have the liberty to do this. Also, information and communication technology. I'm sure we all have studied the the Information Technology Act. And as a part of that, right, we are somehow, to some extent, acquainted with the basics of information and communication technology. We know the basics, right? So you just need to brush up certain things, though those are absolutely legal matters, but we need to know the basics. So what you can do is you can procure for yourself, let's say, a long list of abbreviations, right? What are these? What do these stand for? So if you have that list ready before you, you just take a quick look at it, right? Maybe once in a while, and then it automatically, your mind gets refreshed, and you again start remembering those things. So it's not, let's see, the best part about MCQ based questions is that you need not remember everything word by word, right? Even if you have kind of a vague idea about certain things, like that, okay, the meaning, or let's say the abbreviation of this could be this, so you just have to take that. So it need not be the exact thing, because you need not note it down, right? You need not write it down in the paper, but you need to click, and that clicking should be done on correct lines. That is very important. Now, talking about, let's say, the basics of internet, or the kind of computers that were invented over time. What kind of computers were invented over time? What are the digital initiatives that have been taken in the educational domain, in the higher educational domain in India? These things are certain things which you will find in the different websites, like UGC, or let's say, where you basically have the digital data available, right, provided to you by the government of India or the government of different states. So directly visit those, the websites, and try to take down the information. So that would be a good way. So up till now, I was talking about theoretical things. Now, if we come to, let's say, the practical aspects, the practical aspects would be, let's say, okay, I missed out on another important thing, that is logical reasoning, which again is something very important. And probably it will come up with so many things like Venn diagrams, or let's say they will give you a kind of a proposition, right? And you have to come up with a reasoning. So deductive, inductive reasonings. So you have to decipher the meaning of something from there. So that's how you go about, applying your logic and your reasoning, and then solving those questions. Now, coming to the practical aspect, you have things like data interpretation. You have so many things like, let's say, the mathematical aptitude or mathematical reasoning, whatever you call it. So there you have some basic, basic questions that are asked to you. I mean, I think class 10, 9, 10 level is more than sufficient, right? So for those things like, let's say, for example, ratio proportion, or let's say profit and loss, discounting. So of course, these things become very important, because ultimately these places are very, very scoring. So all that I had done was, let's say, when I was preparing for this, so I was literally, and you must be knowing that there are several YouTube channels. So I remember I was referring to a channel called Exams Race, and they keep solving the questions, the paper one questions. BSI Academy, these two channels I was referring to while I was preparing. So these two channels helped me a great deal in kind of, practicing things, because they would practice it right on the screen, and I would sit with my pen and paper, and I would simultaneously practice it on the piece of paper. So that kind of helped me, have a grip over the first paper, which many of us who are, let's say, like for me, for my, I mean, my case, I'm extremely poor in maths. So that fear of kind of practicing these mathematical reasoning and aptitude, that was always there. But as and when I started practicing things, the solving Venn diagrams, or let's say pie charts, or things like that. So I started finding some interest when I saw that, okay, I'm being able to, right? So keep doing it, right? From, let's say, you all have all the previous year papers with you. Just figure out, okay, this portion is dealing with mathematical reasoning. So today I will solve mathematical reasonings from all these papers. Let's say you take 5 papers. So you solve them simultaneously and you see how well, or let's say how much you have improved in the process, right? So similarly, if you're dealing with something called, let's say, logical reasoning, pick up the questions from logical reasoning and keep solving them at one go. Don't be like, okay, I'll solve everything today itself. Don't sit and think that I'm going to solve the entire paper in one day, right? Because ultimately you need to remember that you need to be consistent with what you're doing. So let's say you're doing comprehension, do 3 to 4 comprehensions at one go. You're dealing with mathematical reasoning, pick up some questions, keep practicing them. Let's say 3 or 4 at a time. You keep practicing them, right? So I think that's how I was a bit confident when it came to my first paper. Now, without wasting much time, I'll come to the preparation on the main paper, that is law, and how I kind of prepared myself for law. Now, I'm sure all of you have your the syllabus that has been provided, and the syllabus has been changed a little, not exactly, I mean, not everything has been changed, but ultimately what you see is that certain things have been incorporated which are in tune with the present day developments, right? So of course we need to be updated all the time. So after NDA has taken over, we can see that there are so many developments that have they have added. So I've seen some people, they kind of complain that they have added something that's that we haven't ever studied. So I've always seen people complaining about this. But see, what you need to think about is that NET is the qualifying exam, and you are not proving your worth as an expert in any particular field. You are not proving your worth as an expert in any particular field. Why? Because ultimately, if I have to study criminal law, constitutional law, international law, let's say comparative public law, or information technology, environmental law, it is not possible, right? If you think over a period of 6 months, you're going to sit and become experts on each and every subject that I talked about, you are under a mistaken belief. It is not so. That's where comes my basic idea, that the basic thing that I wanted to talk about. And that is, you have to be very, very strategic in your approach. So let's say if I start with some examples, I'll help you understand what I am basically trying to say. So for example, if I talk about, let's say, jurisprudence. So if I'm talking about jurisprudence, you will see that what I practically did was, I had a privilege of interacting with some juniors of mine while I was preparing for NET. And they were just, fantastic, exceptional students who, in turn, I learned from them. So I used to sit and interact with them, maybe weekly. And I used to discuss so many important things, let's say, with respect to jurisprudence, because I had studied jurisprudence way back during my LLB, but I didn't study it, with too much of attention, of course. But now, as I had seen that I had to be a lot more attentive when I studied jurisprudence. So what was the approach that I had taken? The approach that I had taken was something like, let's say, the first day when I sat with the entire compendium of, let's say, the entire question bank, I was literally lost, and I was very, very confident that I'm never going to clear this particular paper. Why? Because it's something which is beyond my capacity to kind of digest. So what I did was, I tried to relax, and I sat with the question paper. I tried to figure out from which subject, the subject, and then the questions that have come from those subjects. So I sat with my computer, and I just kept typing the questions that I was seeing in the previous year. So let's say from jurisprudence, there are, let's say, a few questions. So I would type those questions in my computer, and then gradually, when I sit and study jurisprudence, I would try to see that, okay, this thing is from here, right? So in that case, you don't feel very low the moment you open the question paper and you are totally clueless as to what you're supposed to do. So ultimately, you have a set of questions that have come till date, right? Till date, these are the questions, let's say, that have come from something called, let's say, the analytical school of jurisprudence, right? So let's say questions from the opinion expressed by Jeremy Bentham, or let's say Austin, or let's say Hans Kelsen. So you have everything in one place. So tomorrow, when you sit and open the analytical school and you start reading about Bentham, so automatically it clicks your mind that, okay, I have read this about Bentham. So just underline it. And people, one more important thing that you can always do is sit with either people who are tech savvy, can sit with their computers, or people who think they are, comfortable with a pen and paper, have a copy, right? Have 2 to 3 copies. And whenever you are reading something, read it completely. You don't have to read it like, okay, Bentham said this, and then all of a sudden from analytical school, you go to let's say, the philosophical school, or let's say to the sociological school, and you open, let's say, Roscoe Pound and start reading about it. No, that's not going to help. It's going to further distract you. It's going to confuse you further. So kindly do not adopt that strategy. Take up analytical school, take up sociological school, and see that there are certain favorites, right? If you have seen the past year's question papers of NET, you will be seeing that there are some favorites, right? You will find a mention of people like, let's say social contract theory, like Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau, or let's say if you find mention of Roscoe Pound and his theory of social engineering, or let's say if you find the theory of Savini and his Wolf's theory that he propounded in the German context, or let's say you have the Hart-Fuller debate, which is based on positivism and natural law theory. These are some of the favorites. So what they have been doing is they have been asking questions from these areas tentatively, right? So almost, if you have 50 questions in place which have come over a period of, let's say, 10 years, I bet you will have at least 5 to 6 questions common from those things that you have already compiled from those previous year question papers. So that's something very interesting. And gradually, what I also did was I had kept one page for one jurist or thinker. Let's say for Salmond, I keep one page. For Hans Kelsen and his theory, I kept one page. Another, let's say for Roscoe Pound's social engineering, I kept another page. So I used to keep this thing, and whatever material or whatever I would read about them, I would immediately note it down. So I had that idea that, okay, if I take it up later and I open that page, everything will be fresh in my mind and I wouldn't get confused any further, right? Now, questions come from, let's say, who belongs to which school? Prepare a list for yourself. This person, let's say you put it as philosophical school, you put it as, let's say, the analytical school or legal realism, whatever you do, right? Just beside that, you jot down the names of the proponents, the chief proponents of these schools, or let's say the people who belonged or subscribed to the understanding of these schools. So you just note the names of these authors and jurists, and the idea. I mean, what are they associated with, right? As I said, like Ehrlich has come up with this concept of living law, right? So you just write, this is the sociological school, this is Ehrlich, and this is the idea of living law. So you have everything in place, right? So before the exam, you just have to flip through the pages and see, because remember, people are not going to ask you, come up with the very idea of what Salmond has said, or let's say not in great detail. just the basic understanding of that school and the theory propounded by the concerned jurist would suffice for this exam. That's the reason I've been telling you, you need to study smart. You need to also study hard, but of course in a smart manner, which is very important for us. You need not be an expert. Realize the fact that you need not be an expert, but you need to know everything. Right now, I come to, let's say, concepts like legal rights. Concepts like legal rights, you have so many different kinds of legal rights, rights in rem, rights in personam, or let's say, I mean, different varieties of legal rights. Just jot them down. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this versus this versus this, right? So you have this entire structure ready before you, that this is, let's say, as I said, right in rem, right in personal. The features, right? You close that thing, right? So a tabular format would be easier for you. So similarly, possession, concepts like possession, or let's say legal duties, right? The theories of legal rights, the theories associated with legal duties, just small little points, because you have read it, you know what is there in the points, right? You need not make it for anybody else. So that is how you go about it. So I think with regard to jurisprudence, I think, okay, one more thing, that is, let's say with jurisprudence or any subject for that matter, pick up the, the most basic kind of book that you can think of, and you need not go very deep into it. As I said, you need not pick up books which have tremendous amount of discussion, which are, let's say, which actually take you through a lot of nuances. You need not do that, right? Just the basic understanding of the concept. Now, let's say if you read certain books for a basic understanding. So I was reading the book, let's say if you pick up V.D. Mahajan, right? It is available to everybody. So you pick up V.D. Mahajan, you pick up Dias on jurisprudence, right? Or let's say you pick up Salmond on jurisprudence. You take up a textbook on jurisprudence by Peyton, right? Who edited this book, published by, I think, Oxford. So these books are basic books covering all these topics. And these would help you understand the things better in a much more simplified manner. You don't have to, because if you want to read about, let's say, analytical school alone, you have the entire book written by, let's say, Austin. Or if you want to read about, so there is no dearth of literature, but you have to understand your purpose. Your purpose is to clear this paper, right? So whatever little is required, you can do that, because you have many other subjects to cover. Now, coming to another important subject, which is my specialization, and that is the most, I mean, closest to my heart, that is constitutional law. So when you read constitutional law, see, constitutional law, I think there are numerous questions that are asked from constitutional law. Now, starting with, let's say, you might think that, okay, it's so huge, it is so, it's extremely vast. How do I go about starting my preparation on constitutional law? So what you have to do is, again, pick up the most basic book that is available, right? It can be VD, I mean, it can be MP Jain, it can be VN Shukla, any book of your choice, right? You pick it up and you look at the question. Again, go back to the same format. Which question has come from which place? Now, let's say from the fundamental rights chapter, these are the questions that have come. So you just enumerate those questions. Don't write, just the 4 options. No, don't do that. So if I say that, let's say, this thing happened by this amendment. So you just, by which amendment? So the answer is this change took place by this amendment. Right to education, let's say, was incorporated by virtue of, let's say, there are 4 options given to you. In the note that you prepare, you don't have to include all the 4 options. You can just mention 86th constitutional amendment. That is it, right? So prepare a list of amendments that have taken place in the constitution. So just give it a read, because you might at any moment see a question that what change was brought by which amendment. So that's again a very interesting way of putting it. Or let's say, how many schedules are there in the constitution? What are the components of the 3 lists that we have under the 7th schedule, right? I mean, how are they connected? Let's say 245, 246 of the constitution. How are they linked to the 3 lists, right? That are there in the 3, I mean, in the 7th schedule to the constitution. What is there in the Now, randomly, if they give you a concept, let's say an entry, they give you an entry and they say, this entry is there in which of the three lists, right? So don't get confused. Just go through it, right? Look at the broader domains, right? So if you look at the union list, it starts with so many things relating to defense. So anything relating to defense, you see, and you will automatically click on union list. So this understanding, this process is very important, right? So, and the most important thing about constitutional law or cracking constitutional law questions is that don't read anything in isolation. That is, today, if you think that I'm going to read, let's say, if I give you a case, let's say Maneka Gandhi. So you read Maneka Gandhi in the context of Article 21 and you close your book. Don't do that. Look at the previous cases, the precedents, right? And the subsequent decisions that have come after Maneka Gandhi. Look at A.K. Gopalan, right? Where we had a positivist mindset and the way we looked at procedure established by law. And we said that, no, we are going to adopt the procedure established by law model, unlike the American idea of due process, right? About the American due process model. And we did not want to have so much of power being vested in the unelected set of judges, right? So that was the reason why we had a case like A.K. Gopalan. Thereafter, we have seen the case of Maneka Gandhi, whereby we have seen the idea of due process gradually started coming into the concept, or let's say in the framework of the Indian Constitution. Gradually, we went ahead and so many things opened, right? In this context, you can learn about public interest litigation. You can learn about the writ jurisdiction. What are the cases? We have seen several cases which indicate the importance of Article 21. And there are so many domains of it. Let's say custodial violence. Let's say environmental litigation. Let's say labor laws, right? So you demarcate, and that trajectory, starting point till the end, the present day development, that trajectory has to be clear. You need not be an expert, again, let me tell you. You need not be an expert, and you need not be like, okay, I'll finish from here till here and I will know everything, because that will take you a lifetime and it will take you a very long time. Trust me, not a lifetime. Don't do all that. These are the important cases. This is the ratio of the case. This is the reason this case is famous for. If you take up Keshavananda Bharti, don't read Keshavananda Bharti in isolation. Look at the starting point. Look at Shankari Prasad, right? Look at Sajjan Singh. Look at Golaknath. Look at Keshavananda Bharti. Look at Minerva Mills, right? And then finally continuing till the present day application of basic structure. Let's say the NJC 2015 judgment. So that trajectory in constitutional law, or any law for that matter, that trajectory should be there in front of your eyes. That it has started from here, it ends still here. And again, let me repeat, you need not be an expert, right? So that is constitutional law. Now, another important thing that I used to kind of follow meticulously is, because see, not all of us are experts in remembering things, at least when it comes to the sections or articles or things like that. It's very difficult, the year of the case. So in that case, what you can do is, there are a few important statutes or some important, let's say from international law, right? If you are studying international law, make sure that you study the UN Charter, you study the ICJ statute, you study the, let's say, the different conventions. Of course, international humanitarian law is also a part of it. So from international humanitarian law, please make sure that you study about all these, instruments that are there, starting with UDHR, the two different covenants, right? The optional protocols, right? Just do one thing, take the bare provisions, not explanations, right? Bare provisions, those 30 provisions from UDHR, learn them, just walk and learn, read it on your own, right? The moment you start reading it on your own, you will see that gradually after 10 days of practice, and you have to compile them. Let's say you have the UDHR first, then you have the UN Charter, or let's say you have the UN Charter, the ICJ statute, the UDHR, the ICCPR, ICSCR, Convention on, let's say, elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, let's say the Convention on Child Rights, on refugees, etc., etc. So you compile them, just the bare text of them, right? Not books, bare text of them. And every day, if possible, just give it a reading, right? Just give it a bare reading. I mean, you don't have to be like, okay, this section says this article. No, just give it a bare reading and see which provision has what. Basically, it talks about what, right? Because I also have seen questions coming, I mean, from the perspective of, let's say, which General Assembly, let's say, resolution has introduced this. So it is very, very difficult for us to remember those exact numbers and all of that. It is very difficult. But again, right, we have questions also where probably they say that this article of the UN Charter talks about what. So immediately it should come to your mind that, okay, this is how you make stories, you make poems, you make whatever you make. But you have to remember these things by, I mean, at any cost. Same goes with statutes like Sale of Goods Act. Of course, with contract, with law of torts. I mean, I wouldn't ask you to do anything like this because that would be dangerous, because you might get proper questions, case law based questions from contract, or let's say torts, or let's say several other subjects. Don't do all that, but at least the ones which are statute based, right? Let's say Sale of Goods Act, right? Or let's say Motor Vehicles Act. Just take the bare provision with you. Just go through them, because at times the questions are very, very straight to the point, right? And you will have to do another thing, people, which I would again suggest you to do, and that is pick up the most basic book that you have on these subjects. You need not go for a very high level study or in-depth study about these things. Not required. Not required, because you are not specializing in this. Let's say you have your own specialization. You are a specialized person, let's say in commercial laws. You might not know everything about constitution, or let's say you are specialized in public law. You need not know everything about environment, right? But you need to know the basics so that you can clear this particular paper. So coming to the another important area of law, and that has been incorporated presently, that is the comparative public law idea. So I was just looking into the syllabus that you have for comparative public law. Now see, they have identified very interesting jurisdictions. Somewhere they're talking about US, which is, I've seen, I mean, it is there, invariably there in all these concepts, like for example, judicial review, right? So judicial review, look at judicial review, how it started in US. Look at the case of Marbury versus Madison. Now, if you want to study more about the US Constitution, the ones who are preparing for these exams, I think there's this website called heritage.org. This website gives you detailed information. I mean, there are small little paragraphs explaining the concepts of American law to, I mean, these explanations are provided by several professors of law from different esteemed universities. So they give certain explanations that what is meant by this provision of the American Constitution. So that heritage.org will be a good guide for all of you. So you can refer to that. Similarly, if you want to read about Marbury versus Madison, there are several. See, if you want information, there are thousands of sources. It's just that you need to figure out, right? If somebody wants to have a detailed idea about Constitution, right? About Constitution, if you want to have a detailed idea, as I said, V.N. Shukla, MP Jain. And there is another important book, which is again a very, very extraordinary development in the field of constitutional law. That is the Oxford Handbook of the Indian Constitution. If anyone can read it, I don't think you need anything else to understand the Constitution. Just so very good, right? Similarly, I was talking about comparative public law. You can also refer to, there's a book, I think, which is dealing with comparative public law. And we had it for our LLM. It was by Peter de Cruz, right? This book by Peter de Cruz, which deals with comparative public law particularly. It talks about various things like types of jurisdictions, like we have religious jurisdictions and I mean, what kinds of government we have. We have a parliamentary form of government. We have a presidential form of government. So you can refer to those books, right? You can also go and do some research in Google Scholar, right? Google Scholar is a platform which gives you links to very, very important sources. So those sources are very important for you. You can just quickly take a look, click on those papers and just give it a reading, maybe 20, 30 pages articles. So just quickly give it a reading and it will give you all the information about any topic that you want to learn about, right? So that is, let's say, comparative public law. Now, for example, there are places like, issues like judicial independence, right? How are judges appointed, right? So they have, let's say, US, they have South Africa, or let's say they have India, right? So let's say in South Africa, they want to talk about judicial independence. Now, interestingly, there are so many facts that will come your way. So let's say, for example, when the Constitution of South Africa was made, it was an entire process, right? And it was the Constitutional Court of South Africa which had given a ratification before there was an interim constitution. The Constitutional Court of South Africa gave a ratification that, see, these are the provisions which we think are problematic. Then finally, when it was adopted in the final constitution, they considered the opinion expressed by the Constitutional Court. You can imagine how important the Constitutional Court of South Africa is, because they have just revived from the ruins that they were reduced to, right, because of the apartheid movement. So this entire process, how judges are appointed in these jurisdictions. In US, how is a judge appointed, right? They're appointed for life. So how many judges are there in US? Everything is just a click away. But you just need to have that hunger in you. Don't take it as a random exam, I'm telling you. Don't take it as a random exam. Whatever you do it with a lot of love, do it with a lot of dedication. It's not about, because whatever you learn, people, this is just a small suggestion, because I've already come to the end of my discussion today. It's a small suggestion that whatever you do it with a lot of love, because law specifically, because my lecture is absolutely, or let's say it is dealing with law and legal affairs. So what I feel is that if you are preparing for anything, please ensure that you are absolutely dedicated, because tomorrow when you stand and teach the children, right, you don't know how you will be able to collect things. Probably you will be connecting things from comparative public law with certain things of constitutional law, or let's say you'll be connecting constitutional law with certain elements of environmental law. So you don't know, but again, then you will be thanking yourself for the amount of devotion you have shown at the time of preparing for UGC NET. You'll be like, okay, thankfully I had done it back then. So I'm able to speak so much about so many, I'm able to link so many things together. So these are some preliminary things that I wanted to share with you people. Now, if there is any other, anything else that you want me to talk about, I think I would request the host to take it up.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, with that, we have actually received some questions. We'd like to take the questions one by one. So the first question is, once the exam is cleared, does it make the candidate eligible to secure a job with the government universities?
See, it is, you become eligible, exactly. You become eligible, but that doesn't confirm that you are going to be selected for that post, right? Because that is the eligibility criteria, right? It's the eligibility criteria. And once you clear this paper, you are eligible to go and apply in any university whatsoever across the country, that yes, I want to apply for the post of an assistant professor, or let's say a lecturer, whatever maybe the name. But it's the eligibility criteria.
Okay, ma'am. And the next question is, are candidates after theory PG diplomas eligible for the UGC NET, or the master degree is compulsory?
See, generally we understand that master degree is compulsory, because PG diploma, that you have to check with the respective universities, right? You have to check with the respective universities whether that is recognized or not, right? Or let's say you have to check with the UGC as well. There are certain guidelines also that are given there. So you have to check whether your diploma has got the equal status with that of a master's degree or not. So I think that is that you can check, but ideally speaking, master's degree is a must with 55% marks.
Ma'am, the next question is, will distance education be acceptable for UGC NET?
See, again, as far as I know, distance, if it's a distance course and if it is a master's, again, it has to be accepted. But if it is anything else, then probably you have to check with them. But as long as it is your master's degree, right, even if it's a distance one, I think that should be considered.
And the next question is, as you know, revision is the main factor for the success in UGC NET law exam, and candidates usually wake up 1 or 2 months before the exam for preparation. What was your preparation or the revision strategy for the part 2?
See, when I started preparing for this particular exam, it was long back, because I told you I cleared it in my third attempt, and I was like, I mean, it was with utmost frustration that I ended up, I mean, going to the exam hall. But I felt that, what the best thing, I mean, the thing that helped me the most was the interaction that I had with some of my juniors who were back then preparing for CLAT. So I used to help them learn the subject, because in the process of learning it with them, I had to give my own inputs. So to teach them or to discuss with them, I had to adopt my own strategy. So I had everything noted down in my paper or page, and I used to take printouts, let's say, from those things that I typed out in the computer. And later on, I mean, before the final exam that I had, I mean, when I cleared the paper, I technically took a 5 days break from my work where I was working. And it was during those 5 days that I prepared. And it was possible only because I had this habit of learning with those, let's say, children who were there with me, who used to, whom I used to teach CLAT basically. So it was just like a discussion kind of a thing. I learned a lot from them, and I tried helping them with the learning process. So I think you can try, I mean, the ones who are aspiring for this can try teaching some students who are, let's say, in the LLB course, or anybody, right? Rather than reading it on your own, or let's say doing a kind of a monotonous study and trying, because it's very difficult to focus. You can try teaching somebody, right? The moment you have that responsibility on your shoulders, you become much more responsible, and you try to deliver yourself in the most perfect manner. So I think that can be a good strategy. But revision, when it comes to revision, I think if you have your notes ready, if you have all the details, notes, I don't mean to say that you need to have all the notes written in volumes. No, just the points, right? Because everything is there in your mind. You just need to look at the points. That's how I think that's the best way of revising.
Ma'am, the next question is, during the time duration between clearing UGC NET law and JRF, a candidate might get anxious. What will you suggest is better clearing both UGC NET and JRF in one go, or planning to ace them one after the other?
See, I mean, experts, there are some experts who say, of course, I'm not an expert, and I have very little knowledge on this. But what I feel is, if things are fresh in your mind, and if you go for your first attempt, I think it's always justified that you apply for both in whichever attempt it may be. Because ultimately, if you don't end up getting a JRF, you ultimately end up getting a net. So that will not, I mean, not qualifying for JRF will not take away your net from you, right? Though you have to apply for both, but it is just the cutoff that matters. So if it's, let's say, 70%, which is for prescribed for JRF, but what is there for net is, let's say, 65%. So ultimately, you end up scoring 65%, if not 70%. So you are qualified for net, if not JRF, right? So I think, but if those people who also want to go for JRF at a later stage, right? If they think that, no, I'm not very happy with net, I also want to go for JRF. So they can put in a bit of more effort, right? They can take a bit of time, because the first exam will kind of serve as a kind of a lesson to them. So they'll be able to understand the pattern. And people, one more thing that is very important is, you try to check. See, this analysis is very important. In the past, let's say 10 years, what kind of questions have come? Try to look at and assess those questions. That in the past 5 years, questions have come from this place. So it is less likely, of course, there's no straitjacket formula for this. It's just, my understanding. So you just do a basic research, see from where the questions have come, and then gradually you kind of, focus on those portions which haven't come, along with the portions that have already come. Because ultimately you're like, okay, it has come from here only, so I don't have to bother. And ultimately, when you end up being in the exam hall, you see that all new stuff you are being asked. So you'll find yourself in trouble. So just that analysis is very important. At at least past 10 to 15 years question papers. Very, very important. Yes.
And the next question is, what is the cap on the number of attempts regarding the exam?
There's no limit. As many times, whatever may be your age, as many times. But I think with respect to JRF, there is an age bar, I think, probably. But not with NET, I guess.
Ma'am, this all questions we had. So I would like to move on the vote of thanks. I, on the behalf of Lex Auxilium and Just Corpus, would like to deliver the vote of thanks. I would like to thank Mrs. Satyani ma'am for taking out the time and accepting our invitation to conduct this session. I would also like to thank the participants who have joined us for this session. Thank you so much, and stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was a wonderful experience. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.